I've been a long-haul trucker for over 15 years now. I've seen every kind of strange thing you can imagine on the road. Weird lights in the sky, half-asleep drivers swerving across lanes, and a few wrecks I still have nightmares about. But nothing, and I mean nothing, ever got under my skin like what happened to me in the fall of 2018 on Highway 50 in Nevada. If you've ever driven that stretch, you know why they call it the loneliest road in America. For hours at a time, you see nothing but desert and distant mountains. No gas stations, no lights. Just two lanes cutting through nowhere. That night, I was hauling a load of lumber eastbound to Denver. It was about 2:30 in the morning. I'd been driving for close to 11 hours. I was exhausted, and my eyes were starting to blur. Then I saw a sign up ahead. Rest area, 1 mile. I figured I'd pull over, stretch my legs, and maybe nap for an hour before finishing the run. The rest area was small, maybe a dozen parking spaces for trucks, a few for cars, and a single restroom building lit by yellow floodlights. When I pulled in, there were only two other vehicles, an old red pickup and a white sedan parked by the bathrooms. I backed into a spot, turned off the engine, and got out. The air was cold and dry, and the only sound was the wind whistling through the scrub. As I walked toward the restroom, I noticed something weird. The red pickup had its driver's door hanging open. The dome light inside was on, but no one was around. I called out, "Hello?" No answer. The desert was completely silent, not even the usual hum of insects. I shrugged it off and went into the restroom. The inside of the bathroom was lit by flickering fluorescent lights, and the air smelled like dust and bleach. I went into one of the stalls, did my business, and was washing my hands when I heard a soft knock at the door. At first, I thought someone else had come in, but when I looked in the mirror, the door was still closed. Then came another knock, slower and harder this time. "Occupied," I called out. No response. I stood still, staring at the door, listening. Then I heard footsteps, slow ones, crunching on the gravel just outside. They stopped right in front of the door. Then the knocking started again, only this time, it wasn't on the door itself. It was on the wall, just beside where I was standing, like someone was tapping from the outside. That was enough for me. I grabbed my jacket, pushed open the door, and stepped outside. The lot looked empty. No movement, no sounds. But I noticed something that made my stomach twist. The red pickup's driver's door was now closed. I headed back toward my truck. That's when I saw someone standing near the vending machines by the restroom. It was a woman, mid-30s maybe, wearing a long beige coat. Her hair was messy, and she was standing perfectly still, facing away from me. "Ma'am," I called out, "are you okay?" She didn't answer. I took a few cautious steps closer, and that's when she turned around. Her eyes looked wrong, wide and unfocused, like she was looking through me instead of at me. Her face was pale, almost gray under the floodlights. Then, in a soft, cracked voice, she said, "Can you help me find my husband?" Something about her tone made my skin crawl. It wasn't panicked. It was just flat. I hesitated. "Where did you last see him?" I asked. She pointed toward the desert behind the rest stop. "He went out there." I looked in that direction. It was just endless black nothingness. I told her in a shaky voice that I had to go, but even I could sense the uneasiness in my voice, so I imagined she could as well. I don't even remember if she responded to that. I ran back to my truck, locked the doors, and started the engine. My hands were shaking. I just wanted to get the hell out of there. Something was going on, and I knew it. This wasn't some innocent woman who needed help. My gut instinct was screaming at me from the start. As I put it in drive, I glanced in my side mirror and nearly jumped out of my seat. There they were, that same woman from the vending machine. There was also some random man with her. They were just standing motionless behind my truck. That was enough for me to practically floor it out of there. I kept glancing at my mirrors as I pulled out of the lot, and they didn't move, just staring motionless as I left. My heart was pounding the whole time, waiting to see headlights appear behind me, but there was nothing. Just empty highway stretching on for miles. The next morning, I stopped at a diner and told another trucker what happened. He said a man and woman had gone missing out there a few months earlier at that same exact rest stop. Their car was abandoned, and no one really knows what happened. They've never found the couple. I don't know if those people I saw were the couple that went missing or were potentially responsible for their disappearance. It could be that someone had been lured into the desert and hasn't been found. Regardless, in all my years as a truck driver, this is one of the most haunting and potentially near-miss stories of my life. I've been driving trucks for almost 20 years, and I can tell you this: the road at night will show you things most people will never see. Sometimes it's beautiful: empty highways, clear stars, a sense of just calmness. Other times, it can be the kind of quiet that feels wrong. This happened to me back in 2016, somewhere along I-70 in Colorado. To this day, I still can't fully explain what I saw. It was late November, around 3 a.m. I was hauling auto parts to Kansas City, trying to stay awake with coffee and talk radio. The stretch I was on was dead. No headlights, no taillights. Just darkness and snow dust blowing across the asphalt. If you've ever driven on this highway, especially at night, you know how dead it can be. Then the CB radio crackled. A voice came through. A male, maybe mid-40s, calm, but strained. All drivers eastbound. You seeing this? Around mile marker 187. I picked up my mic. Negative. What's going on? He came back. There's a wreck. Still looks fresh. No cops yet, just watch yourself. I slowed down. A few minutes later, I saw it. Faint hazard lights flashing ahead. A small blue sedan sat half buried in the snow. Its driver's door was wide open. I pulled over and grabbed my flashlight. I felt that if someone needed help, it would be right for me to offer it if I could. It was cold enough that my breath came out into thick clouds. When I walked up to the car, I could see the windshield was cracked and the front bumper was smashed in, but there was no one inside. The keys were still in the ignition and the engine was dead. "Hello?" I called out into the dark. Nothing. I checked the ditch, thinking maybe the driver had wandered off to get help, but my light only caught snow and empty road. Then I noticed something. Bare footprints leading away from the car. Not boots or shoes. Bare feet. What the hell, I thought? Who would wander around in the snow barefoot? They led across the snow and disappeared into the woods beside the highway. I stood there for a moment, trying to process it. Then my CB crackled again. It was the same voice. "You stopped too?" "Yeah," I said. "The car is empty. I think the driver walked off." He paused. "Don't go after them," he said. I asked him what he meant, but the channel went silent. Something about the tone of his voice made the hair on my neck stand up. I looked toward the tree line again. The wind had died down completely. It was silent. Then, from the woods, I heard it. A faint sobbing. A woman's voice. "Help me, please." It was coming from deep inside the trees, maybe 50 yards out. Every instinct told me not to move, but that voice, it sounded real and desperate. I took a few steps forward, shining the light between the trunks. "Ma'am, where are you?" The crying stopped. At this point, every bone in my body was telling me to go back to the truck. Everything was wrong. I was out in the middle of nowhere with no real idea of where this person was. I bolted back to my truck, slammed the door and locked it. My hands were shaking so badly, I dropped my keys twice before getting the engine started. I called the police just to make them aware of the situation as soon as I got back on the road again. I couldn't think of anything else to do at that point. I was just trying to process what could have possibly been going on there. I made it to the next truck stop, about 40 minutes later. I parked under the lights and just sat there, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it from being tired. When I finally got out to fuel up, I noticed something that made me freeze. On the passenger side of my rig, on the steps up to the door, there were footprints in the snow. Bare ones, small, like a woman's. There were no other prints in the snow on the ground at the rest stop, just the ones on the steps of my truck. The next day, I got a call back from the highway patrol. The dispatcher told me they did find a car at mile 187, abandoned, with the keys in the ignition, but no sign of anyone in or around it. Almost 9 years ago, and so many questions about the whole thing. The footprints in the snow on my truck, the voice I heard in the woods, the voice on my truck's radio. I don't think I'll ever have all the answers, but this is still the most unusual and unexplainable event I've ever experienced. I've been a long-haul truck driver for over a decade. The job can be lonely, but it's simple. Keep the rig moving, deliver on time, and stay awake. I've broken down in snow, dodged deer in the dark, and seen drunks crawl out of wrecks. But the one thing that still makes me uneasy happened on a run from Laredo, Texas to Albuquerque in 2020. It was the first time I ever realized how vulnerable we really are out there. It was about 2 in the morning when I decided to pull off onto a gravel turnout off US 54. No other lights or vehicles, just desert. I'd been awake for almost 16 hours at this point, and figured I'd grab a quick nap in the sleeper before sunrise. I did my usual routine. Engine off, doors locked, curtain drawn. It was cool and quiet, just the faint ticking of the metal cooling down. I remember thinking how nice the silence was after a day of engine noise. Then, I heard a thump. It came from the passenger side step. Not a loud bang, just like the sound of someone's boot hitting metal. At first, I thought maybe it was an animal. Then I heard a man's voice, low and muffled, right outside the door. "Hey, you awake in there?" I froze. There's no reason for anyone to be out here at 2 a.m., miles from the nearest town. I grabbed the small flashlight I keep beside the bunk and sat still, listening. The handle rattled. He tried the door. Then again, harder this time. "Come on, man. I just need a ride," he said. His tone wasn't angry, just off, like he'd rehearsed sounding calm. I shouted back, "You need to leave right now." He didn't answer. A few seconds later, I heard gravel crunch as he walked around toward the driver's side. That's when I saw the shadow through the windshield. A man standing close, trying to peer in. He cupped his hands against the glass, blocking the moonlight, like he was searching for movement inside. I stayed completely still as he stood there. He didn't flinch, just stared for another couple seconds, then walked off toward the desert. I kept the doors locked and sat up front with the flashlight in my lap, heart racing. After maybe 10 minutes, I convinced myself he was gone. Then I noticed something in the mirror. A faint red glow, like the ember of a cigarette, coming from the brush about 30 yards behind the trailer. It would light up, fade, then light up again. He was definitely still out there. I called 911. Reception was weak, but the dispatcher called enough to send a county unit my way. She told me to stay put, stay inside, and keep the engine running. So I did. It took nearly 40 minutes for a deputy to arrive. It felt like the longest 40 minutes of my life, as I was sitting there dreading hearing another noise or seeing him beside the truck. When the headlights of the deputy finally came up the road, the red ember vanished. The deputy searched the area with a spotlight, but didn't find anyone. He told me there had been reports of people flagging down truckers along that route, sometimes trying to break in, sometimes worse. He advised me to push on to the next truck stop. I did exactly that. The next morning at the truck stop, I went to check the passenger side door. There were fresh scratches around the handle, deep ones, like from a screwdriver or knife tip. The deputy called later that afternoon. About 15 miles north of where I'd been parked, they'd found an abandoned pickup on the side of the road. Out of gas, door open, a set of footprints leading off into the desert. They were never able to locate the driver. That night, when I crawled into the sleeper again, I couldn't relax. Every sound, wind, gravel, and the cooling metal, felt like footsteps. I started a new habit after that run. I only stop at lit rest areas or truck stops. No more isolated turnouts. I was talking to another driver on the CB about weird roadside encounters. When I mentioned what happened, he cut me off and said, "I saw him on my last route up that way too." Apparently, other drivers had been seeing that same man for months, always walking the shoulder late at night, waving them down. No one ever saw where he came from.